Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of the 30-Minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me is now my co-host, Maniac, Mark Tipton.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. Here to talk about what I believe is all of our favorite subject, professional wrestling, and all the topics that go along with it, and the controversies. And with that, if you're ready, I'd like to get right into our topic of the day.
Absolutely. Let's rock and roll.
Well, when you're talking about professional wrestling, to a great many of the public, when you say professional wrestling, the first thing that can come to mind is WWE. Obviously, there are a great many different companies that are professional wrestling companies, but by far they are the best known. And so it seems like a general topic for this podcast to talk about the WWE. In particular, about the way they present their product, their version of professional wrestling, so to speak, and your opinions on it.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. Like, everyone knows Vince McMahon, and the general consensus is that that he killed the territories, that he killed the entire territory business. So that's not exactly my mindset. My mindset is that he baited the territories. And by baiting the territories, what I mean is he went national. Cable television was coming no matter what we did. But cable television was coming, and Vince saw that, and he hopped on it. And he baited those territories into trying to compete with him, on a national level. My belief is that if the territories would have backed up and fortified their own territories, then they could have survived. Now, how long they could have survived, we don't know. But I feel like they would have definitely survived through the 80s into the 90s. Of course, Vince rated their talent, and of course that's a huge issue too. But that was the territory's bread and butter, right? Find new talent, create new stars, that kind of thing. So I feel like if they would have fortified their territories, then they would have had a much, much better shot than trying to go national events.
It's interesting because really this started when Vince took over the company from his father, Vince Sr. And when you say baited, there are a great many within professional wrestling who hold a lot of ill will towards Vince Jr. for the way he did this. I don't mind if you don't mind getting into this, because up to that time there was kind of a gentleman's agreement,
right,
about the way you would compete with one another in terms of territories. And Vince very clearly did not abide by those rules.
Yeah, apparently, I mean, as the story goes, it was not only did Vince Sr. promise everybody he would never run against him, because he had the most successful territory, because New York and things like that was such successful that at any time he probably could have competed with those guys. But not only did he shake their hands and say, I'm not going to do it, but when he sold the company, I think he told the guys, hey, my son will never compete with you. And I think that's where a lot of it comes ahead, because Vince didn't just break his word, he broke his father's word, and his father's word was gold, in the wrestling business. Everybody respected Vince Sr. for sure. And then Vince would do things like, a lot of these territories, they had 30-year relationships with their television stations, and they would have done really well, and Vince went in a lot of times and said, well, we'll give you $30,000 or $50,000, whatever the number was, to play our show instead of theirs. You know what I mean? That put a territories on. But the thing is, he couldn't have done that everywhere. He couldn't have done that in all 30-plus territories. So if everyone would have, like I said, just backed up and fortified their territories and worried about their own business, maybe the promoters wouldn't have made $2 million a year or $3 million a year, whatever they were making. Maybe they made $500,000. You know what I mean? Maybe they would have had to, poor promoters would have had to back up and make $500,000 a year instead of $2 million. But they still would have been wrestling for a living, and there still would have been a much better territory business. And to me, guys could have went to WWF, maybe made some money, done whatever, and then if they didn't like what was going on, they could have kicked back to one of the territories, and it would have helped everyone out. It would almost, I don't want to say like a feeder system, because those guys would have hated the fact that they were feeding Vince McMahon talent, but it definitely would have been better for them in the long run not to try to. Promoters cannot work together. I've said that for years, and everyone's looked at me like I was crazy. Everybody, oh, why don't you get together and all work together? It doesn't work. You have to have one Indian, one chief to go, this is it. This is the direction we're going. This is the decisions we're making. So when Vince said it themselves, they have no... They wouldn't be able to make a lunch order together, let alone run a wrestling company together. And that's kind of what happened. Everybody that tried to work together, it all fell apart because someone was trying to steal someone's talent, or someone didn't like the way this was going or that were going, or this guy should be on top and not that guy, and everything didn't work out.
Well, it sounds to me like you're talking about egos playing a very big role in the lack of cooperation. And I kind of like your the idea you mentioned there. So the way I interpreted what you were just saying is that they could have had someone in the WWF gain national notoriety who, for whatever reason, wasn't being utilized there, come to their promotion, and then capitalize on that notoriety to promote their local territory.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at a guy like Dino Bravo, for instance. Dino Bravo ran his own territory in Canada, huge star in that area. Well, eventually he made a deal with WWE, and he went to the WWE. And, Dino Bravo, we know who he is, but he didn't have like a super successful run there. You know what I mean? Like, he could have easily just said, okay, never mind, and then went to the Carolinas, you know what I mean? Or went to Florida or went back home or, whatever he wanted to do. But I think that would have been better for him, especially, I don't know if people know this, but Dino Bravo ended up being in the mob after he got out of WWE. And was viciously murdered because he was in the mob. So, I mean, Dino Bravo might be alive today if something like that was happening, No,
well, I, for one, did not know that part of Dino Bravo.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that we have to speak to when we talk about WWF is the sports entertainment aspect of it. The presentation that WWE brings is often very different from what we may see in other promotions, and there may be really good reasons for so, but I'd like to let you speak about that and the ever controversial term sports entertainment.
Yeah, like Vince didn't invent the term sports entertainment, but he definitely popularized it. But I mean, the thing with him was he was trying to separate himself from everything else, which is completely the right thing to do, because he was trying to, we're not all these other wrestling federations. He was trying, we're sports entertainment. We're this, we're that. We're more cable friendly. We're more television friendly. So while I understand the reasoning for it in the beginning, I think that now at almost 40 years later, I think that it does anything, it alienates the fans. I never forget I've been wrestling for 20 years. I never forget the time that a young kid came in and he told me, he wanted to be a sports entertainer his whole life. And I felt like I died a little bit inside. You know what I mean? Because none of us ever grew up. We heard the term sports entertainment, but at the end of the day, it was always professional wrestling. There's ropes and there's posts and there's wrestlers. It's wrestling. You know what I mean? But when that sports entertainment, it started getting to the forefront of that kind of stuff, like late 90s, early 2000s, when it really started, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Like I said, those kids grew up on that. And when he said that, I couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I wanted to do a double take. But that's kind of been their thing. They have their own style and their own way of doing things. And I don't mind that. I just wish it was more pro wrestling centered. You know what I mean? They do a lot of things like, and I've said this for years, the further you get away from the core of our business, it just inches a little further away. Like, you could be 5 feet away and then you're going to inch to 6 feet and then 7 feet and so on and so forth. So stuff like vignettes where two guys are talking and there's a camera 3 feet away from them, but they're not supposed to interact with that at all. Like they don't know that exists. To me, as a wrestling fan, as someone, we're trying to present this as a sport, or we're trying to present this as a competition or a real life or whatever it is, to me, that takes me out of my suspension of disbelief. So then but we were there, and then all of a sudden that became okay. That became palatable to everybody. Everyone seemed to be okay with that. That's just WWE. And then we go a little bit further, and then all of a sudden, I don't remember if you remember when Kane was promoting his movie, Eyes Wide Shut, or what was it? Eyes Wide Shut. That's way not it.
No, it was See No Evil.
See No Evil, yes.
Yeah,
See No
because May 19th.
May 19th, exactly.
I remember.
So he was walking down the hall, and he heard a voice in his head saying May 19th. But we as the audience heard it as well. And I just, even as a young man, because that was, 2005, 2006, I'd been wrestling, 6 years at that point. But even as a young man in this business, I looked at it and go, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? How am I supposed to believe that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I said this on the last podcast too, I think, is, wrestling's like a lot of things. Wrestling's like movies, wrestling's like music, wrestling's like comic books, but wrestling is wrestling. And there's certain things you can do in wrestling that you can't do anywhere else, and vice versa. Yes, you can do that in a movie. Yes, you can do that on a primetime television show. But to me, that kind of stuff does not belong in professional wrestling, because it takes everyone out of their suspension of disbelief.
That's true. I do understand what you're getting at there, because, and taking off on what you just mentioned, I once felt that those were dirty words. Sports entertainment were dirty words to me. Although over time I came to interpret it more as an advertising gimmick, and I think
Right.
and that's kind of what I think you were getting at.
Yeah.
Ford and Chevy make very similar products, but they're going to do the best they can to differentiate them.
Mm-hmm.
Vince would love to say that WCW was wrestling.
Right.
Obviously, taking a little Southern dig, I understand that.
Yeah.
But he didn't. They have wrestlers. I have superstars.
Yeah.
They do pro wrestling. I do sports entertainment. Here's why mine is different.
Yeah.
So to that degree, that didn't bother me as bad. That's marketing
Yeah.
my product. I understand that.
That's branding.
I understand. At least I came to understand that as I got older. But another aspect of that is the way the matches in WWE, even beyond the backstage things that you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I can tell a difference. I have seen performers, wrestlers, in other promotions who then come to the WWF, WWE, as it may be, but the in-ring match, there are differences in the performances I see from the same performers in a different venue. Mm-hmm. I'd like to, if you could, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There's like a WWE style is what they say, and it's like and it's changed a lot over the years, especially in the last 10 years. Like it was still very, what I would call wrestling, in the early 2000s, thing like that. But since, they went this route of let's steal all the ROH guys, let's steal all these independent guys that have all this buzz. I don't care if they weigh 150 pounds or whatever. Since they started doing that, like even that, the style has changed. And like to me, it's almost like the blind leading the blind. You know what I mean? They're primarily producing television matches. You know what I mean? And there's very few times that there's any emotion behind them. You know what I mean? One of the biggest things that I have a problem with is their stance that there is no good and evil. There is no heel and there's no babyface. Everybody's their own whatever and thing like that. But it's completely hypocritical, because when you watch the matches, there's somebody trying to be heel. They're just doing a half-assed job at it. There's somebody trying to be a babyface, but they're just doing a half-assed job at it. You understand? So they're still using those roles, but they're just using them so incorrectly that it doesn't help anyone involved. You know what I mean? If a babyface has no sympathy and a heel has no heat, then the match is dead in the water to begin with. You know what I mean? They have to love somebody and hate somebody, unless there's, every rule we talk about has an exception to the rule, but it doesn't change the rule. Good versus evil is still the most used thing in all of storytelling, whether it's be any form of storytelling. It's good versus evil. It's the devil versus God. It's whatever, right? So WWE tries to take that out of the equation, and I don't know why, because they feel like everyone's they're the Patriots and this guy's the Ravens or whatever they want to say, but that doesn't make any sense, because if you're in New England, Patriots are the baby faces, and whoever comes in is a heel. Right, so it still has that element. Matter of fact, there was a wrestling company, an independent wrestling company, that tried to do that. They had one company in one part of the state, and they had another company at the opposite end of the state, and their whole premise was that these two ends of the state didn't like each other, so people would be heel in one part and babyface in another, and vice versa, and it didn't work.
That seems like a tremendous, difficult thing to put on the.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to book that scenario, and I think that also plays into what we talk about suspension of disbelief. If I book a guy and he's 6'9" and he's a monster and he eats raw chicken on my programming or whatever it is, and he's just this monster. I don't want to see his Facebook with him, holding a dandelion, and cuddling a puppy. You know what I mean? That completely kills it for me. You know what I mean? And I know you're going to agree with me on this. I just recently heard Nikita Koloff talk for the first time, like with his real voice, and I'm still kind of upset about it.
I never want to hear that.
I know, I'm shook. You know what I mean? I do not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, I remember finding out that he wasn't really Russian and kind of being crushed. You know what I mean? So and like I said, I just recently I heard him speak without the Russian accent, and I was like, oh. Same thing with Santino Marella. Same thing. Like I never wanted to hear him speak without his thing, and then I came across a podcast or whatever it was with him talking that way too, talking normally, and it just, man, why? You know what I mean? Like, why not protect it for whatever reason? I guess I'm very old school, as you know, but that's part of the reason.
Well, that reminds me, the one that crosses my mind is Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
I came across somewhere on the internet, one of the dangerous aspects of it is I heard a snippet from a television segment where he spoke a little, not the way we traditionally hear him speak. And to hear that,
yeah,
I'm trying my best to wipe that from my memory now like it never happened.
Right.
I want to hear that lisp or whatever you want to call it, that speech pattern he had. That's the way I want to remember Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah. And that's kind of been my, me as the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and you know me as the Golden Boy Greg Anthony. You've known me personally for many, many years. Pretty much, it's a fine line. Like, I'm pretty much the same person no matter what. Like, I talk, and the things I talk about and how I do things is pretty much dead on. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I've had the little bit of success that I had, is because I'm like they talk about, I'm myself with the volume turned to 10. You know what I mean? And I think that's where the most successful gimmicks come from, is when you can take whoever that person is and turn it up.
I do. One thing you mentioned did catch my attention when you were describing the situation with the promotion at opposite ends of a state. In that situation, it seems to me that the promotion would be depending upon the audiences in each place not being aware of what's going on at the other events. And in today's internet, instant communication, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, it seems that that has a tremendous impact on the way you have to present professional wrestling now.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how they did it because I didn't keep a close contact of it, but that was what it was, obviously they were trying to do. But it was basically, well, this town hates that town and that town hates this town, so they should hate every wrestler from that town, and so on and so forth. It just, it's not conducive to professional wrestling. You know what I mean? I like having people around that have an outside perspective to give you that exact thing, outside ideas, thinking outside the box of professional wrestling. But you still have to have someone wrestling go, no, yes, that will work, that won't. Maybe if we polish this up, it could work, that kind of thing. And that one just seems like a completely out of left field idea for me.
Certainly. The another thing you mentioned I wanted to go back to, if I could. You talked about how WWE was aimed at television. They were producing television matches. Yeah. I think I understand where you're going with that, but I would like you to expand on that if you could. I'll give you a simple example. I'm a guy in the audience. This is my perspective on things. When I'm watching WWE program, even if I'm at the arena, as I frequently am, when they come, back when we were still able to do live events, and I hope we return to those days soon.
Right.
I felt like the wrestlers in the ring very rarely ever acknowledge the audience.
Right.
And I've always viewed professional wrestling as the ultimate audience participation event. And that's something that's always bothered me about their presentation.
Yeah. And that's to them, you know, if you have, you know, 15,000 people in an arena, that's great, but you're playing to the 5 million at home. And I completely understand that thought process. But the thing is, when you play to those 15,000 is when the magic happens, right? And I said this, imagine this, like the one guy on WWE television that was acknowledging the crowd was Daniel Bryan. And what happened? You know what I mean? Like they got behind him. He actually looked at them and went yes and pointed his and interacted with them in a certain way, and it got a reaction. And it's almost because they were starved for it. You know what I mean? Like because they didn't have that kind of reaction. They're so television heavy on everything that they just constantly are like, oh, camera. Even stuff where when a guy grabs a hold and he's got his back to the hard camera, which you're never supposed to do, right? But he's got his back to the hard camera to the point to where they shimmy in place to kind of turn around to get it. Right there, that's something that suspension of disbelief for me. It's like going to an NBA game and the director of the videography goes, hey, do you mind shooting 3 in this corner so we can get your facials on this shot right here? You know, it doesn't matter if you're open or not. I'm just saying. You know, there has to be a little bit of give and take to it. We're still supposed to be watching a competition. We're supposed to be still watching a sport happen in front of us. So it doesn't need to be so overproduced. You know what I mean? And that's a big word.
Well, to that issue, that the one that always gets me is how they always seem to be just in perfect place to catch the reaction of someone who kicks out at 2.
Right.
When there's a kick out at 2, the person who was executing the pin goes into a state of shock, wide-eyed and mouth gaping open, oftentimes, and they almost, the match seems to stop for a moment while they take that in.
Right.
And that feels more, that's television. That's not.
Yeah.
That's something that sticks out to me just as a guy watching at home.
And that means a lot less when people kick out of 97 things a night. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with having a match and the babyface getting his ass kicked, and then he makes a comeback and he beats the guy with his finish. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That has went on for a century in our business, and it's worked. You understand? And that's what I'm tired of seeing. First match go out there and have 10 false finishes. Second match go out 15 false finishes, and it just keeps up in the ante to where nothing means anything anymore. You know. One thing is they just it's one thing after another. They don't give anything time to breathe. You understand? It's instead of Roman Reigns' finisher being a spear, it's like, well, it's 3 Superman punches and 2 spears. Like, you know, where's the line? You know what I mean? The thing is, though, when WWE wants to do something right, they get it right. You know what I mean? But there's so many times that they get it wrong. You know, if you look at people they protect, you know, obviously they protected the Shield, and they all became stars. They protected Orton and Cena, became stars. You know what I mean? But so many guys are just expendable as to where, you know, I'm not saying everybody, and I don't think this at all, not everyone should be the main event, not everyone should be heavyweight champion, but everyone should have a spot. You know what I mean? If I'm tired of them devaluing their own products. You know what I mean? If someone works for you, you know what I mean? Why would you tell somebody that they're the shits? Because if they're the shits and they get beat, you know what I mean? Then it doesn't matter if they're the shits. But if they beat someone else, then the shits just beat somebody. You know what I mean? It's very counterproductive.
Yeah, the devaluing of talent. That's something that rings true with me. I wanted to see. Let me see if I can approach this. One of the things I have seen on WWE television from time to time is they will have an individual, you use the word protect, an individual they want to protect, say Cena, Randy Orton, whoever you want to say. They have to really build that guy up. I have seen them put them in the ring in handicap matches against tag teams. In some instances, even a team that is a current championship team, and have him, Braun Strowman.
Right.
Here's an example. They brought him in to demonstrate what a monster he is. They would put him in the ring with tag teams, and even championship tag teams and have him plow through them. And I thought, what have you just done to your tag team champions and in effect the whole tag team division?
Right.
They were the best that you had, and here you have.
So I'm going to talk about this. Great segue. Thank you. Because what I really want to talk about and what this whole episode really is culminating with is there's something that I like to call the WWE Paradox. Okay. And what it is WWE spent so many years telling everybody this is entertainment, this is a show, this isn't wrestling, this isn't real. All this kind of stuff is a television production and pay-per-view and things like that. That what it did was it made the fans think that every decision was arbitrary, that it did not matter who had talent and who didn't. Vince McMahon was just going to, at the end of the day, he was going to pick who he liked, and that was going to be the guy, right? So then the fans try to rebel against that. And what happens is, and if you look at what happened with Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. They are the culmination of the paradox. Because is there any more two anti-WWE guys than those two guys? From a fan's perspective, like we've pushed Hulk Hogan, John Cena, The Rock, Steve Austin, all these guys. Okay, now we want you to push the 5'7" guy from Seattle, Washington, that's a vegan. Or we want you to push the guy that, like, they joke around and say look like a fry cook. You know what I mean? Like, the two most anti-WWE guys are the guys that end up getting that push out of that paradox. You understand? As to where if they just would have listened to the fans and kept it where they kept the illusion real that, hey, we're listening to you. Because when the Shield happened, no one really picked Roman in the beginning. Like, we all knew Tyler Black, Seth Rollins, and we all knew Moxley, right? Those were the guys we thought were going to be stars, right? But then they started pushing Roman a little bit, and all of a sudden the fans picked Roman, right? And then when the fans picked Roman, then WWE picked Roman, and then when WWE picked Roman, the fans go, oh, no, we don't want him now. You picked him. So who are we going to pick? We're going to pick Daniel Bryan again. You know what I mean? So it kind of threw everything off. You know what I mean? But, like, the thing that happened with Cena, same thing, They knew he was the hand-picked guy. So they were the ones that were saying, no, we don't want him. That's why they booed him out of the building all the time. I mean, but he made a great point. What am I supposed to do, turn heel so you can cheer me? You know what I mean? It's that paradox. But to me, it's if you would have kept it in a real-world scenario and you would have made the fans think, hey, we're listening to you in every situation, right? You would have gave John Cena and Roman Reigns actual heels to work with. You understand? Actual heat and actual heels to where you can't cheer for that guy. He has no redeemable qualities to make you want to cheer for him at all. That's the kind of heels that you need to build the wrestling business and build a babyface for sure. So if you had those kind, then I don't think we would have had the boos of the Cena and the Roman Reigns and stuff like that. I think that we would have given no choice.
That's well, that is something that impressed me a lot. You mentioned the Shield, and I know we're drawing close on time here, but I want to what you're talking about, the crowd first choosing Roman Reigns. What that played into is what I will call the famous Vince McMahon big man favoritism. I'm going to use the word favoritism, and people saw Roman Reigns as embodying that.
Right.
And I suppose that's played into why, for instance, Dean Ambrose, he gained so much more popularity because he was the anti of that.
Right.
You think that fed into that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Like you said, WWE's always been, the big guy heavy, but like this is something I've had to learn too. And listen, you know me, I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'8". I'm 200. I've been under 220 pounds for most of my career. That kind of thing. So I'm not a big guy. And it took me a while to learn this and swallow this pill, but big guys draw money. You understand? It's not, I don't think it's a negative thing necessarily. It's just that's the facts of our business. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the guys smaller don't have a place and some guys can't transcend the weight like a Rey Mysterio and things like that. But it's just that hey, they want to see the guys that are 6'2", 250 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, when guys say, oh, they're so much more athletic today, I don't agree with that because they're 170 pounds. What are they supposed to do? Right? But then you see a guy like Too Cold Scorpio who is 250 pounds and still does things today that I don't think a lot of them can do. You know what I mean? To me, that's more impressive. And you go back and you look at those guys that were doing these just incredibly athletic things.
Well, very good. I don't know. Are we?
Well, yeah. Once again, everybody. Like I said, it's never going to be 30 minutes on the dot. We're gonna be in and around 30 minutes. We're going to pick a topic and we're going to go to town. I think we covered a lot of great things today. I want to thank Maniac Mark Tipton for being my co-host. We're going to be strapping in each week for you and trying to get down to some of this stuff. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on the 30-minute Midas Touch.